I'm going to show you the only real way to scale brands using meta ads. And the reason why I can say it's the only real way is because in this video, I'm going to show you the different nuances you have to consider around crafting a really solid meta strategy. So we're going to go over account structures and different ways for different types of brands and verticals to structure the account effectively. We're also going to talk about how to set targets. I'm going to show you also how you can scale via volume and not have to care about in-platform ROAS and actually make more money overall. And then I'm going to show you our rules of how we run accounts, how we make creative testing decisions, how we make kill decisions, meaning kill ads, as well as how we scale and what rules we use to scale accounts. And the last thing I'm going to show you there is also how to set right targets that will actually make your brands profitable. So this is going to be a long video. So you want to get a pen and a pad and take notes because this is a bit of a masterclass I'm cramming into one video. Now, it's important to understand that how we run meta ads and how you ought to run meta ads now, it's really changed over the last 8 years. And I can say that because I've been running meta campaigns for the last 8 years. And the reason why it's changed so much is because brands have become significantly more profit conscious in how their media dollars are spent. So that means when you are running campaigns, whether that it's your brand or you're working for a brand or you're an agency, this entire structure and strategy I'm going to teach you is all centered around that one core thesis, how to run campaigns profitably for brands. Now, what you have to understand is some brands may be running ads on more than one platform. They may be running ads on Meta. They may be running ads on Google. They may be running ads on TikTok. There's many different permutations, but you have to understand attribution. So in this video, I'm also going to show you how to think about attribution, how to make the right decisions when it comes to just Meta specifically. But then we're going to talk through how you should make decisions if they're running advertising on many different platforms. Now, if you've been watching my videos for any length amount of time, or if you're new here, for example, I have a very large e-commerce growth agency. We have 70 people. We have worked with 356 brands over the last 6 years. We've been doing this a lot. And our way of doing things has evolved as it will always evolve. How you do things today is going to change in probably 1 year, 2 years. And so a big part of just being a really amazing media buyer and running campaigns for brands is that constant evolution. But the most important thing is to document what works. So for us, one thing that we're very anal about is documenting how we run media, how we run it the best way, what that seems to work the best way, because we've tested everything and we're always going back and retesting things to confirm what is the better way. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive right into the media buying strategy first, and then we're going to get into the juicy stuff around how to scale profitably with volume, how to set targets, and the different fun calculators my team use to help set these targets and to come up with these decisions. So the first thing you have to understand is I'm not going to teach you what is meta ads and how to set up the campaign. I will create a few campaigns inside of Ads Manager just so you guys can see how I would conceptually do this account strategy. But I'm assuming that you kind of already somewhat know how to create a campaign inside Meta, so we're not going to go through that. I'm just going to dive right into how to set up the structure. How do we set it up in different permutations? So how we do things right now is we believe in having core campaigns per objective. So for example, our first method is campaign per objective. Now, how this works out in actuality is something like this. So here is an example. So what we would do is we would have one campaign per business objective. So I'll show you examples of different types of brands and how you would set up that account. But let's say, for example, you have a one product store. In that one product store, you have one main objective, and that is a sales campaign for that one main objective. So what we would do is we would have one CBO campaign like this, and then we would have ad sets. Each ad set would be a creative batch. Now, what is a creative batch? A creative batch essentially is a round of creative. Now, a batch can be one angle, and you take in one angle and made 3 different versions of it. Or you have made one creative batch, and that batch is around a new concept, but you made 3 variations of that batch. It's whatever you want to define it, but how we define it essentially is a concept. We take one concept, and then typically we'll have at least 3 variations of that concept, and that goes into one ad set. So how we call it internally is this is a one campaign scaling and testing. Now, I want to make it very clear. It doesn't mean that we won't have more than one campaign. On the contrary, as you'll see in a few moments, but we focus on one objective. Now, this one product store, as I'll show you an example in a few moments, you could have one objective, which just evergreen campaign, and then also you're running a sale on that same product. Those would be two separate business objectives, and we'd have two separate campaigns for those. But how it would work is, let's say, for example, you have that one campaign, which is a CBO. We have one ad set, which is typically we go broad most of the time. 9 times out of 10, all the brands that were scaling a lot of money are completely broad. Every once in a while, if you don't have any data, when you start a new store, you may want to test some lookalike interest just to get data. But for us, broad 9 times out of 10 always outperforms everything else. So we'll have one ad set, and then each time we have a new creative batch. So let's say, for example, I'm going to make this up. Let's say I've got these headphones, right? Headphones. One ad set would be I have a concept targeting entrepreneurs. Boom. But then I have two more concepts. One is targeting working at home moms to block out kids' noises. And another concept is around a dude who's flying on an airplane. I'm kind of making this up on the spot. Then each concept would go in an ad set with 3 variations per one. So every time, let's say one creative batch didn't perform, I'd kill it. And then every time I had a new batch, I would just upload a new ad set. The reason why I like this is because it's quite efficient. So really what you're focusing on is you're mainly just focusing on your budget at the campaign level, which is the CBO, and then let a meta choose where it's going to deliver budget based off of what it thinks is going to perform. And that's really efficient in my opinion. A lot of our brands are using this kind of structure and then separating out the different business objectives per campaign. Now, people always ask me, well, how many creatives per ad set? For us, there's not a perfect rule, 3 to 5, typically per each concept, we're creating at least 3 variations, sometimes 5, depending on what that concept is. But then depending on the amount of budget, if it's under $50,000 a month in spend, we try to keep it less than 5 ad sets. Really like 3 ad sets or less is ideal, but we are just throughout our testing, which I'll show you our testing rules. When we're testing these creative concepts, we're pretty quick to kill stuff that's not performing, but we don't want to go over 5 ad sets. Now, we have a brand right now that's spending $900,000 a month, and in one of their campaigns business objective, they have 9 ad sets, but because they're also spending so much money, I'm a really big believer in keeping things as consolidated as possible, just so you can have more efficiency in your spending. All right, so let's show examples. So example number 1, let's say we have a shoe brand, and we work with a lot of shoe brands. Okay, a shoe brand, you may have different types of shoes. So you may sell boots, you may sell high tops, and you may sell shoes and having an offer for shoes. So how we would be structuring this shoe brand, because they have different objectives. And one of their objectives is to control the sales volume of their boots, control the sales volume of their high tops, but also to move inventory, they're also having a shoe offer. So for us, we would have one campaign per business objective. So it would look like this. For the boots, depending on the spend, obviously we have one campaign dedicated to evergreen boots. What I mean by evergreen is ads where just promoting the boots without any kind of offer. It's evergreen. It's just ongoing. And then inside of that campaign is here we have different creative batches per those boots. Now, if for example, the brand determines, and this happens a lot, like, hey, we have our main collection of boots, but we're just launching a new boot category or a new boot launch. And because that's a unique business objective, they want to sell a certain amount of volume, we would create another campaign just for that boot launch, for example. So why I like this strategy specifically is, and you'll see it later, how we track and how we measure if something is successful. I like to be able to control the marketing spend per business objective so I can later report on how successful that is performing. And so that's why, in my opinion, this is the only way to do it, and especially right now, is you need better line of sight how things are performing so you can make better decisions. If everything was like grouped into one, there's all kinds of nightmare scenarios that can happen. For example, you could scale yourself into oblivion, as I'll prove to you later in this video, where you may be scaling towards one target, but because most of the spend's going to a product that has different margins, you could actually be scaling at a loss. And that's why, in my opinion, this is the only way to do it, is to have this clean delineation between business objectives. Okay. Then you'd have a campaign dedicated to the high tops business objective, selling the high top shoes. And again, if the brand's like, we want to be more micro in our control, or we're going to do a new campaign launch just for high tops, well, that would be an extra campaign for that business objective. And it's okay. I just have this thought. Some people ask me, well, do you have to have 3 ad sets? No, you could have 1. And if you have in that 1 ad set, things are just crushing, cool, just keep running it. And then if you have a new creative batch, add that new creative batch and then let Meta decide what is going to perform. For example, we have a fashion brand right now that we've grown 400% in the last 4 months, and they have 1 main product line, but we have 3 ad sets that they're all crushing. So we just let Meta just keep spending. Let Meta choose, give a lot of flexibility. Okay. But then if you have a business objective where you have a shoe offer, that is a separate campaign as well, because you'll see later on in a few moments, it will allow you to have have a much better line of sight of how things are really performing when you have it structured inside of Meta around a specific business objective. And then in the back end of your e-commerce platform, you can then report on that business objective. So this is a very important part in terms of, in our opinion, how we can scale brands profitably, as you'll see in a few moments. Okay, so that's an example of how we would structure a shoe brand based off of the business objective. Now, the least amount of spend that you have, it will determine how much more strict we are in the number of campaigns we allow to run. The more budget that the particular brand has, the more flexible we can be in having separate campaigns per business objective. Let's say you have a brand that's print on demand and you make hoodies, right? You can like put pictures of people's dogs on hoodies, for example. If it's just one main type of hoodie, well, we would have one campaign just promoting the evergreen product of how you can put your dog's face on whatever. Same thing, ad sets going completely broad. I meant to mention this earlier. We also exclude purchasers. So we typically start with 30 to 180 day purchasers. If you're finding that Meta is serving too much to current customers because of view attribution, you're seeing that there's too many people being caught up in view attribution, we may go very aggressive and upload a list or a dynamic list of all purchasers to exclude that. But coming back to this, if you had this kind of brand where it's a print on demand selling dogs' faces on hoodies, we'd have one campaign just pushing evergreen, but then at different points in time throughout the year, if they're running like a BOGO, like buy one, get one free, we would then have a separate campaign just for that BOGO. Now I get this question a lot. Hey, why doesn't it make sense to just have the BOGO inside of this campaign? I'll tell you why. Because if you had, for example, BOGO ads inside of this evergreen campaign, a few issues arise. Number one is margins on someone doing a buy one, get one free will be different on someone buying full price, especially if you're promoting this BOGO. Number two, the moment you kill this BOGO campaign, you had BOGO ads inside of this evergreen campaign, the moment that sale ends, you're gonna have to reset all of your expectations and rechange how you make decisions because the performance is gonna get worse. So I like to keep them separate. So when you kill this isn't affected as much. A third reason is because a lot of times when our brands create an offer like this, they have a dedicated landing page just to that thing. Well, the moment that thing goes away, it's much easier just to keep running the evergreen as well. And then the last part is it makes it much easier to then report on, I spend this much amount of money on this BOGO offer. Here's how many people and how much revenue I got from that BOGO offer because I had a very clean delineation this way. And that's why I like to do it. And same thing as previously, every time that we have a new creative batch, we just upload it as a new ad set with those ads there. Okay, so conceptually, this is how we run media for majority of brands. Now it differs based off ad spend and business objectives. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dive into how we make decisions on creative testing, how we make decisions on scaling. I don't think you guys need me to build this inside of the ad account. It's quite simple. CBO, ad sets are broad. And then every time you have a new creative batch, again, which is a concept with 3 variations, add a new ad set. So let me walk you through now how we make killing rules. So this next part is where a lot of people get stuck. They ask me, hey Ray, how do I know when something's a winner or not a winner? Okay, later in this video, I'm gonna show you guys how to set targets based off of like CPA or based off return. But typically to answer that question, you have to have, what is my target CPA? But I think it's right, I show you what are the rules we use. And then afterwards in this video, I'm gonna show you how to come up with those targets, okay? So to answer that question, you have to know at what target CPA do I want to acquire a customer, or at what target return. So some people use ROAS, return on ad spend. Some people use MER, marketing efficiency ratio. Some people use AMER, which is new customer acquisition marketing efficiency ratio. I know that seems quite complicated, just different strokes for different folks. And so you have to determine what is right for you. I'll show you the differences when we set KPIs in this video to help you make this decision and what we use. But as a general rule, let's talk about creative kill rules. So for example, creative kill rules are the rules we live by when we determine if we should kill an ad set or creative of a new creative test, or just any creative in general inside of a campaign. Now, why this is important is because if you aren't run by rules or standards, you will be run by emotions. Emotions are terrible masters. Rules and standards are great masters, okay? Because you need to be run not by your feelings, but by your standards. Now, the creative rules helps you to, in the moment when you're not emotionally sound, to make sound decisions. I used to do a lot of options trading, and one of the best things I ever learned was the coaches inside of my group group would teach us to set rules based off our risk tolerance, based off of our goals, based off of our unique differences in how we make decisions. If one person's more emotional, the rules have to be more concrete. If a person can be more logical, they can be a bit more flexible. But one of the best things I learned was that you're far more successful options trading if you set rules that you live by. You can always change the rules and go back and test and see what's a better set of rules to live by. But when you live by those, you have far better performance. So here's our creative kill rules. Number one is just in terms of like budgets. Now, if you're doing CBO, don't have to worry about this as much. It's at a minimum, it has to be at least $50 a day. So when we set creative kill rules, when we look at budgets, for majority of our brands, we don't have to worry about this first rule, but some of you guys watching this video, you don't have a lot of budget. I get it. So what you want to do at a minimum is set your budget so that you'll get at least one purchase a day at a minimum. Now, you should be doing way more than that, but some of you guys, that's just not reality with how much money you're willing to spend in your capital. So at a minimum, at least $50 a day, so that you'll have the ability to at least have one times your target CPA, or at a maximum 3 for $16. So if, for example, if your target CPA is $100, I'm going to recommend you spend at a minimum $100 a day on that campaign. If your target CPA, if you have a high AOV, is $500, I mean, you could set it at $50 or $100 a day. It's just going to take you days or weeks to be able to make decisions. So for us, with the brands that we work with, we want the budget on the campaign level to be at a minimum where we get at least one purchase a day from it to make decisions faster, but at best 50 to 100 times the target CPA so that we can move very quickly. Now, this is just a general note. Let's talk about how to check winners. Okay, so the first thing is before we make decisions, we look at what we call view through attribution versus click attribution. So if you guys are watching this video, I'm sure you guys heard of that. Very simple. Inside of Meta, if you go to the columns section, actually, let me show you guys real quick. This will be much easier. You can see this campaign right here. You can see how many conversions came from view through, how many conversions came from 1 day click, how many conversions came from a 7 day click. Now, for some of you guys who don't know what the heck this is, what this does is it tells you, in my opinion, what is more incremental. Meaning, if someone just saw an ad, but it didn't convince them to make an action, that ad's not incremental. But if high majority of people who are purchasing are actually clicking on the ad, that means that ad is creating a reaction for them to actually buy. And so we can infer that ad is more incremental because it's getting people to buy. So for us, if you see anything that's over 20% of your purchases are coming from view attribution, that is a problem. But if it's under 20%, that is okay. So this brand is slightly below 20%, which is okay. That's within our bounds of safety when it comes to creative testing. How do you make decisions on the creative testing? We make decisions based off of certain scenarios. What I mean by that is everything's based off a target to acquire a new customer. So if we've spent 1 times our target CPA and there isn't a purchase yet, but our outbound click cost is over 2 times the average evergreen outbound click cost, we kill it. So if on average your evergreen ads is costing you $2 to get a click, but that ad hasn't got a purchase yet, but it's costing you $4 to get a click, kill it. Or if you spent 2 times your target CPA without a purchase yet, kill it. Now, what's important to note here is this really depends on your risk tolerance. We have some brands who are 7-8 figure brands. They have a higher risk tolerance to where they're more comfortable to spend more to get that data, but it really is a personal decision. A lot of our brands are quite cost conscious, and so we'll be more strict in these kill rules. If it's spent 3 times your target CPA and it's still not within 25% of your target, kill it. So an example would be if your target is $35, then if it's over $43 that it's costing you to acquire a customer, kill it. Okay. If you spent 4 times your target CPA and it's still not within KPIs, kill it. And if you spent 5 times your target CPA and it hasn't hit target, kill it. So this is how we make our rules on when we determine when to kill new ads that we've created and those ad sets. So for example, just kind of do a recap real quick. Let's say this is a new creative batch, because if you remember, actually, let me go right here. Let's say this is a new creative batch that we tested, and based off those rules, we'll start killing off ads as they do and do not hit those rules. And then eventually, if the whole ad set doesn't hit it, then we'll kill the entire ad set and then upload a new creative batch. And so we're just uploading new creative batches, let the ad sets and ads that rise to the top and hit our KPIs, just keep spending and rinse and repeat. So that is essentially how we run it. Now, let's talk about scaling rules. This is where everyone wants to know, how do I scale? Well, I'm going to give you a range of how we make scaling rules. The harsh reality is I have seen hundreds of different scaling rules. I'm gonna show you our scaling rules. Is it the only way? No. Are there other ways? Sure. Is there one best way? That is heavily debatable. So I'm gonna walk you through ours. So the first one is before we look at anything else, before we look at in-platform, we look at, is the store or collection hitting its MER or AMER target? Or you can even use contribution profit if you want to use contribution profit, which I'll kind of show you how to do that in this video. We start there. The reason why we always start there is because Meta isn't always telling the whole truth. And I can explain, and I can make several videos showing example after example of brands where Meta showed one thing, but then the reality was totally different. So we have just learned from that so that now before we make any decision, we look at, is the store hitting their MER or AMER target first? Okay, yes or no? Okay, if it's and based off that rule, then we look at, okay, so let's look at Meta, for example, is in platform campaign or ad sets hitting our platform target? Now, I want to make it very clear. Your MER store, your store target for MER, AMER is going to be different than what's in Meta. The reason why is because MER and AMER include your fixed overheads for your brand. It includes other costs. It includes other variable costs in your business. And so the target should always be different. You should not set a blanket, let's say 3x MER target. There's also 3x Meta platform target. They're different. They should be different. And I'll show you how we make those decisions. Now, is in-platform campaign hitting its KPI? Okay. If it's not hitting the KPI, here are the decisions that we make. If the campaigns or ad sets are within or above 25% in the last 3 days, do nothing. Okay. If the campaigns or ad sets are below 25% or worse, you can use some of these decisions. You can scale down the budget 20% to see how that helps. Pause ads that aren't hitting the specific CPA targets we've outlined previously. Look at delayed attribution of other ads. If delayed attribution has rolled up and they're actually hitting target now within 30 days, turn those back on, or graduate a new creative winner, add more creative. If you are, so if the store is hitting MER, AMER target and inside campaign and ad set is hitting target, yes, then make these decisions. If 25%, if it's above 25% when hitting your KPI, increase budget 20% to 100% based off how aggressive you want to be. In my opinion, we'll make that decision every single day. If within 25% of KPI, do a very light scale. Sorry, that's supposed to be 20%, excuse me. If it's within 25% or less, increase budget 20%. If it's below 25%, you can make these rules, which are exactly the same as previously, besides pausing ads that aren't spending. So this is how we make our scaling decisions. Now, this is based off of risk tolerance. It's based off of how aggressive you want to be. For some of our brands, if things are looking really sweet, we are scaling very aggressively. And there's other ways you can scale as well. Like you can do duplicating campaigns, duplicating ad sets. I've seen a lot of different ways. I'm just showing you ways that, in my opinion, are very easy and I've seen work a majority of the time. Okay, so as a recap, we have talked about our account structure, how to media buy and set up your account structure for different types of brands. We have showed you creative kill rules, scaling kill rules. Now what I want to do is I want to just walk you through scaling with volume. This is very important. We're going to set targets here in a few moments, but this idea that I'm going to teach you, if you get this one idea and you get it exceptionally well, you will be far more successful than your peers, whether that is a competitor who is a brand, whether that is a fellow freelance media buyer or another agency. You will be far more successful. The reason why is because it'll also make all of this stuff that I showed much easier. Let me tell you what I mean, is that scaling with volume is easier, in my opinion, than it is to maintain a perfect in-platform ROAS forever and eternity. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through scenarios and explain what I mean by this and prove this point. Okay, so what I have here is a calculator we use to prove this point and to also model out for our brands. So for example, when we are scaling on Meta, if you remember previously, before we make any decisions on how we scale, what do we look at? We look at the store. We look at on an overall, how is the store performing on an MER basis or contribution profit or net profit? We look at that first, okay? Now, why we do that first is because some brands, let's say the goal is to make $100,000 in profit. Let's say that's the goal. Okay. You can do that by having a better ROAS or by more volume, but less margin. And why I'm bringing this up is because you need to understand what is that actual success look like, because you may be able to touch nothing in the ad account and just keep spending money because the store is performing so well. I see that all the time. And almost to a point to where you can just keep spending money even though your CPA is incrementally going higher. That is why we always look there first and be clear on that first. So let me show what I mean. So let's say, for example, we have a brand, and let's say this brand, and I'm covering this, by the way, because I'm going to reveal it as we go through this lesson. Let's say this brand, for example, the forecast they have for this month is they want to make $145,000 in revenue and $25,000 in contribution profit. Okay, so let's say that's their goal. And this same brand, they have over 90 days on average new customers they acquire. Well, 10% of them will buy again over 90 days. That's not that great, but most brands have some kind of LTV component to them, and 10% is quite low over 90 days, but let's assume. So what that means is if they can hit that target and do $25,000 in profit over the next 90 days, there'll be an incremental extra $14,000 in revenue based off their repeat purchase rate or their repeat purchase cohort. Make sense? And they're going to spend 50 grand to do that. Now, a few other details. This brand has $26,000 in costs, fixed costs, and their gross margins is 30%, which means their cost of goods sold is 30%. Make sense? So at the end of the day, if they hit this target, it's a 17% margin, net margin. Okay, makes sense, right? Pretty simple. Typical e-commerce brand, and a lot of brands, that's not that difficult to achieve. To have a 2.9 MER, which means for every $1 you spend, you get $2.9 back overall. Not that hard to achieve, right? Especially, and this is the important part, if you keep yourself very lean. Like that's where most brands screw themselves up, is they bloat their resources so much to where it throws their entire business model out of whack, and that's why most brands just really struggle to hit profit. Okay, scenarios. So what I'm going to prove to you is that if you can get clear on this first, it makes all the other decisions I talked about previously that much easier. And why we often start here for our brands, because if you remember everything I mentioned, the decisions you make inside the ad account is based off CPA, right? Cost to acquire customer, cost to acquire customer. Well, if you can do this, you can scale more aggressively and be okay with your CPA going up, up, and up, and up, and up. And that's why it's so important to media buying and to scaling brands this year, is because this right here is how we've had wild success over the last few years. So let's say, for example, this is the forecast, but let's talk about reality. Things don't often go based off how we forecast, right? So let's take this. Let's say, for example, that's our forecast, but what's really happening is we are hitting way less revenue because our performance is way worse, right? Happens. Sometimes Meta doesn't perform. And so instead of having a 2.9, we hit a 2.5. So we still spent the same, but our revenue is way worse, right? What does that mean as the trickle down effect? Well, we make less net profit and less LTV revenue. Makes sense, right? And less margin overall. Okay, but let's say, for example, real quick, what a lot of brands do when they start to see performance getting worse, most brands make the wrong decision and they say, let's pull back ad spend. Why? Because they're like, man, I'm not making that much profit. So the only thing I can do to try to recover this, which is the sunk cost fallacy, is I'm going to pull back ad spend. And this is why that's the wrong decision most of the time. Because by doing that, and let's say even you pull back ad spend, so instead of spending 50K, you spend 40K, which logic often tells us if you pull back ad spend, performance can actually get a little bit better. And let's say ROAS even increases or MER increases to 2.6. But what happens? You even lose more profit overall. These are the exact same numbers. All we're changing is just the ad spend and the return. What happens? Performance even gets even worse, and LTV over 90 days is slightly worse. But let's say, for example, you're one of the smart brands and you understand this game and you understand modeling like this. So let's say performance is even way worse than our forecast, but we say, okay, it's worse. Let's actually increase spend and let's spend 10% more. So performance is worse than our forecast. So we actually increase spend. What happens? Well, profit gets better than these two models. It's still less than our target, but what happens is we have significantly more profit in this scenario than the other scenarios. And LTV over 90 days looks even better as well because of increased spend. But let's say, for example, because you understand how this works, you understand this game, a volume is often more better than being conservative, is you increase spend by 20% and performance is even worse. So let's say instead of having a 2.9 forecast, you're at a 2.45, but you understand this game and you actually increase spend by 20%. So what happens? Well, you're not hitting your target, but this scenario is now far better than these three scenarios because you're making more profit overall, less margin. I understand that, less margin, but better 90-day LTV. Make sense? But let's say you really understand this game. And let's say you play with the models, and this is what we do for our brands. Play with the different scenarios and the models of, okay, performance isn't where you want it to be. We have three choices. You can do nothing, which doing nothing is still better than pulling back ad spend, or you can pull back ad spend and things may not go the way we think they're going to go, or we start to model out at what model and scenario can we be way more aggressive and scale with volume. Make less margin, but scale with volume. And that looks like this, where all we do is we double ad spend. Performance is now even worse in all these scenarios because as you spend more money, return will go down, but it's just part of it. It doesn't go down by a 1-to-1. So a lot of people think that if I'm going to double my ad spend, my return's going to be cut in half. That doesn't work that way. It's often just incremental loss in return, but with more volume. So we spend $100,000 at a way worse 2.25 MER. Again, if you can keep your fixed costs the same and scale, amazing. But what happens? We make more profit and more LTV in 90 days. So really, when you think about it, this model right here is far better than this model right here. From a actual profit dollar amount you make and the rollover effect of the 90-day LTV multiplier as well. Why I'm bringing this up is because if you want to scale and you want to be amazing at scaling, and I know this video is just about like meta ads, this is the kind of decisions you need to be making for your brands. Whether it's your brand, you're working for a brand, in-house for a brand, or you're the agency, you have to make decisions like this because at the end of the day, more profit in many different ways. And a big reason why most of this video is not just in platform, because Meta is getting easier and easier to run. Like structurally from actual inside the Meta ad account, it's getting easier and easier to run. So what has to change is the strategic mind behind running it. Create is getting easier to make with AI. And so these are the kind of decisions that separates people out. So we covered this. Scaling with volume. The other part of scaling successfully, and I've been teasing this throughout this video, is having a better line of sight of how much I spent on specific business objectives and how much revenue it made. So for example, just to kind of do a quick recap before we dive into this next part, is if you remember, I showed these campaign structures, right? Is separating things out per business objective like this. For example, a CBO campaign per business objective. The reason why is because the harsh reality is if you do not do this, there is 100% chance you will make the wrong decisions. 100% chance. The reason why is because different brands have different margins per product and collection and different business objective. And so your target you set in your account, on the campaign level or at account level has to change. And I'm going to prove that to you over the next few moments. So for example, the first thing that we do is when we are running brands per business objective is we have a tracker per business objective or collection. So the business objective could be an end of season sale. It could be a collection 1 or a collection 2 drop, right? Okay. So the big thing that we do is we separate out our reporting per business objective. The reason why is because depending on the business objective, whether that is a product, a sale, a new product drop, a collection, there's different margins you have to account for. So for example, what we'll do is we'll have tracking per collection and or product. So for example, end of season sale. If you have end of season sale and you have a bunch of different products in there, you have to come up with a separate target, including that discount. If you have a new product drop on a new collection, those are different margins. If you have another business objective on another product or collection or category, that's another business objective. And so what we'll do is we'll have spend because in the Meta ad account, we have a separate campaign per business objective where we are tracking spend and return and revenue reported from Shopify, WooCommerce, and BigCommerce for that collection. And we're tracking the actual MER, marketing spent on that collection, revenue generated from that collection, and what's the actual contribution profit of actual profit it's making us. And that's the real pinnacle part right there, is if you do not do this, there is 100% chance you will be scaling things that are making money. You'll be missing massive opportunities because you don't have that clear line of sight. If I spend this much amount of money on this thing, here's how much revenue is generated on this thing. And so for example, just by looking at this, and this is real data, by the way, guys, this is real data, but I anonymized it for our brands. So you have a end of season sale, we have a collection, and we have another collection. End of season sale so far hasn't gone so hot, right? We've only made $5,000 in contribution profit. We spent $10,000. Again, that's profit. So we are making money. It's just not stellar. And then here's the actual return, marketing spent on that collection, revenue generated from that offer. Not great, but we are making money. And we'll do the same thing for every ad platform. So if there's TikTok, if there's Google, do the exact same thing. Versus this collection, you can see how it's going so far is it's spent $17,000 on marketing spend on that collection. This brand, most of their money, they only spend on Meta anyways. Here's how much revenue generate, here's how much contribution profits made. Same thing on this collection. So what this does is it allows us to make the right decisions based off the right performance, based off the right contribution profit per business objective. now you can start to see why this makes so much sense that inside of Meta, you have to structure things based off business objective. So you can actually be profitable based off business objective. Because what I see a lot, unfortunately, brands that come to us that want to work with us on the agency side specifically, or the brands inside of our mentorship group when I'm reviewing their campaign strategy, is things are grouped together and they don't realize it, but they're losing money or they're missing massive opportunities because they can't see this stuff like this. We covered account strategy, very simple. Rules, very simple. Scaling. Now we're going to talk about setting targets. Now, this is going to get very nerdy for you guys. If it hasn't already got nerdy, get prepared, get buckled in. It's going to get way more nerdy. So, how to scale brands effectively on Meta is you have to be very good at setting targets. I'm gonna walk you through how to set some of these targets. First, you have to understand what is your product's break even. Then you have to understand, okay, now find the blended break even, because up store, unless you're a one product store, if you have several SKUs, you have different margins per SKU. So now you then have to find the blended break even. Then what you want to do is you want to find what is my target new customer CAC and my target customer CAC break even. Sorry, I was supposed to say break even. Then we want to know how we can scale more with volume to make more profit. So we already covered this part, but you need to cover these three parts. So let's walk through how you can do this. We have calculators all over the place for our brands. Let's take a fashion brand, for example. Let's say you have a fashion brand, you have different products, you have different offers for those products. Well, very simply, you start with finding out what is your product's break even. Now, I know this is very simple for some of you pros who are watching this video, but it's important to refresh on this information because some people miss it, and it's important that everyone understands how to do this. So very simple. Take the retail price you're going to sell that product and include all the costs. Your cost of goods, your pick and pack, your gateway fees, other costs that are included with that. That could be packaging, could be included in that other cost if you want to get more specific and break that down. If you're paying for shipping, like free shipping, what's the weight of those products, for example, because you're going to pay differences in shipping based off weight. So, and you can find this based off, you could just Google it and you can see USPS and UPS shipping rates based off weight, especially if you're doing free shipping, include all that. And then you can use a calculator to determine, okay, what's my cost of goods sold, which is all this costs added up. What's my gross profit, which is my retail price minus all these costs. Because here's the thing, your gross profit is your break-even CAC for these products, okay? What's the gross profit percentage? And then what is the in-platform break-even ROAS? Just look at this. So for example, a hoodie. That's what this line is right here, a hoodie. A hoodie I can sell for $59 and what I feel like would be competitive. So what that means is if I was going to run ads for that hoodie, my break even would be $40, meaning I could afford to acquire a customer, well, not afford. I could spend $40 to acquire a new customer and break even on that product. Now, as you'll see in a few moments, that doesn't include your other overheads in your business, which we're going to get to. But you can see right here, these are, if I was running ads, this is just the product's break even without including any other costs, is these metrics right here, right? So that's the first step. First, understand for every single product that you sell, what is the COGS, what is the gross profit, and then what is the break even on those things, okay? Now let's move to the next part. The next part is let's find the blended break even. Okay, so what is blended? Okay, so blended is essentially all the products and SKUs that I sell. What would the actual blended break even be? Or you can do blended CAC, blended target. We're gonna talk about those different permutations. But the reason why is because as you saw a few moments ago, a hoodie and a hat have very different margins. So what that means is if you set your target or break even to be 1.5 for a hoodie, but a hat's break even is like a 1.7, but you're just using 1.5 as you run your marketing and your ads, is like, just don't go below 1.5 and you're good. You actually can be losing money on all the hat advertising and marketing if you're running at a 1.5, right? And it's important to understand the differences. So let's say, for example, this is a real brand, by the way, real data. This is a brand and their top 12 products. So imagine that they're only selling 12 products. That's their 12 SKUs. And here's all their sales data. So we do all that same calculations, get their gross profit per order, COGS, the product break even, and they have pretty good margins, right? 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, pretty good margins. So what you do is come up, what is my blended break even? Because there's very different break evens, but also, and here's where a lot of people get screwed up, I'm also giving away discounts to sell this stuff. So it's not just, as an example, this product right here, line 2, it's not just a 1.2 product break even. To sell this product, I'm giving away a crap ton of discounts, which means that has to be included in my break even. And also, some products have a crap ton of returns. You have to include that. A lot of brands have returns, so include that in your blended. So what you can do here is this. Essentially, you'll take your gross profit that that you generated divided by your gross sales, and that gives you your true blended break even on the products, because it includes money taken out for discounts, money taken out for returns. So just look at this real quick with me. Just looking at the cost of goods sold in the retail price, that's what you think your product break even is. But when you take out reality of discounts and returns, the real blended break even is a 1.8. Okay, cool. So we got that, right? So now we understand true blended because it includes all the products that we're selling, all the costs that we're selling, discounts and returns. So now I know when I'm running my marketing, I have to make sure from a blended perspective. So from the ad account alone, I have to at a minimum be above a 1.8. Otherwise, I'm for sure losing money. But that doesn't include your other costs in your brand. And we're going to then do those calculations. And the reason I'm taking you through this process is because you need to understand the nuances to make better decisions as you're scaling brands inside the ad account. You have to know these things I'm showing, otherwise you will not be successful. Okay, so we now found the true break even on just the product. So worst case scenario, I'd stay above a 1.8. But now let's do the calculations really quickly. This is 1 month of data on setting targets. So here's the gross revenue from the last month. Here's the cost of goods sold from the last month. Here's how much margin I gave away on discounts, how much margin I gave away on returns. Here's how much money I spent on advertising. So my contribution profit is $227,000 from 700 grand in gross profit. And I have $75,000 in overheads. So that's fixed costs like my salary or other salaries or other contractors or my rent space, my warehouse, you name it. And I am simplifying this a lot just to make it easy for you guys. So this brand really is making only $150,000 in net profit, which is 20% margin. So Ray, boil this down for me. What are my targets? I'm glad you asked. Okay, now you could not run your store at a 1.8 MER or in-platform return because it would not be covering their overheads. It wouldn't be covering their overheads. So when you come up with targets, you have to include, well, what is my target to cover all my other costs? So, because this also doesn't include ad spend. I meant to mention that. This doesn't include ad spend. You have to include ad spend. Now, if you remember, just really quickly, based off this right here, different volumes can give you different profit, right? So that's what's hard about setting targets for a lot of people is that it's also based off of at what volume. So we're just going to make an assumption that assuming the volume is the same, what would be our targets be? And this can be based off your forecast as well. So what is the break-even CAC? So the break-even CAC will be $88. How do you come up with that? Is you take my contribution profit, or in your case, could be my target contribution profit, divided by my number of orders. That means as long as I'm spending money and I'm spending less than $88 contribution profit, dollars to acquire a customer, I'm breaking even. But if I want to have 20% margin, EBITDA, 20% margin, I need to be acquiring customers for $59 or less to guarantee 20% margin at this level of scale. So at this ad spend, at this return, at this gross revenue. So really what it is this is like where I need to sit between, meaning if I'm at $59, I'm at 20% margins. But if I'm between 59 and 88, depending on my volume, is going to determine how much profit I make. So really your target MER to hit 20% margins for this brand is 5.1, but your break even MER at this level of scale is 3.4. You have to understand these differences. So let me show you how this models out. So let's go back to my favorite calculator and do the exact same scenario. So the exact same scenario I showed you, this brand, this was their forecast. We want to do 700 grand in revenue at a 3.5 MER assumption. Here's my contribution profit, so my target. But could I scale more? Sure. Down here, could I actually accept less return, but spend 20% more spend? Yeah, but it's not as great of a model as this one. But could I double my ad spend and instead of a 3.5, get a 2.6 MER? And would that be better off volume? Yeah, I make way more profit and I make a better 90-day LTV as well. That, my friends, is how you can media buy like a savage this year. Yes, I showed you in-platform account structure, all that kind of stuff. But when you understand this, you can break away the CAC targets that are holding you back from spending more money if you can model things out like this. This is how to be a savage rockstar media buyer in this year and how to scale with meta ads. So I know you guys stuck around. I know this took a long time, but this without a doubt is how the best of the best in the world think. So for example, I should do a proper call out to Nate Lagos. He did a training inside of our mentorship group, showing them some of these stuff and he helped make some of these calculators. But the reason I'm bringing him up, he's a CMO of Original Grain. He talks a lot about the number one reason why Original Grain is just an 8-figure brand has scale is because they focus more on volume than in-platform platform ROAS and return perfectly. That is how we're scaling our brands. That's how you will scale more effectively, is to be thinking like this that I showed you. If you have questions, ask me in the comments. I answer all my questions. But if you feel like you want some of this one-on-one mentorship, we actually have a mentorship program for DTC brands. We have 46 founders in it, and we've only been live for 5 months, where we teach them these methods. I work one-on-one with them to set these targets for your brand, to make scaling decisions. It's incredible. Click the link in the description. But if nothing else, and you want a bit more video from me, you should check out my other video where I showed how we scaled a brand to 1.5 million a month in ad spend. You can check that out after watching this video.